Every single Monday, I come out with a new video specifically regarding questions I get a lot. One of the questions that have come up quite often recently, especially with the rise in the market, is should I invest a lump sum or should I dollar cost average? So let's break exactly what you should do, what you should consider, and ultimately all the education that goes into this decision-making process. So number one is that what are the two options that we have in our situation? So we have a lump sum. All that is the pile of money that you have in your bank account versus dollar cost average. All dollar cost averaging is investing a small amount, a specific dollar amount that is, on a scheduled periodic time basis. So the two options obviously present challenges with a lot of investors because different situations arise where you could have either option and sometimes one option only. So let's actually break down what each one of these are. So number one is lump sum investing is typically going to do better, but let me explain exactly why. Let me explain exactly what you should be considering during this decision-making process. If you look at any data points over an extended amount of time, let's call it 20 years, dating back to 1926, it's pretty evident lump sum investing is going to do better. Now, why is that the case? Because time in the market is better than timing the market. That's the general principle behind this whole entire question. So when you have money in the market for a longer period of time, which lump sum investing means I'm investing a big dollar amount right now versus taking that big dollar amount and slowly and steadily investing that over a period of time, you're usually going to do better. Now, is that always the case? Absolutely not. Here's some data from 1976 to 2022. So Finley and Zorin calculated that lump sum outperformed dollar cost averaging 68% of the time across global markets measured after 1 year. However, dollar cost averaging was still better than remaining completely in cash. And it outperformed cash almost 70% of the time. So it's not about keeping your money in your bank account because it's not the right time to invest. That is not the point of this question. The point is, how can I get the money in there as quick as possible? So here's what my rule of thumb always is. Always dollar cost average unless you have a lump sum. Now let's break that down. So when I'm investing, most people are getting paid from a paycheck. Let's call it a W-2 paycheck, and they're getting paid every 2 weeks. So therefore, you don't actually have the lump sum we're referring to. And therefore, as soon as I get that money from my paycheck, that should be going into my investment accounts right away. So that's what I always say, always dollar cost average unless you have a lump sum. The goal is not, because lump sum investing historically is better than dollar cost averaging, to save up a big lump sum, because that doesn't make sense. That's backwards. That's just holding money in cash for a longer period of time and then investing a lump sum. The whole concept of lump sum investing, it's not because the big dollar amount or splash that you put into the market at one time, it's that you have longer periods of time on your side. And that's why it's historically better. So if I had that money, let's say a bonus comes through, a windfall comes through, grandma decides to give me my $25 annually at Christmas, whatever that is, I want to take that money and invest in the market as soon as humanly possible. But typically I don't have a big lump sum. So I'm on record, I don't carry hardly any cash. Like we're talking like $5,000 cash max at any given point in time. So I don't keep money in my bank account ever. I keep money in the market as soon as possible. So if I get a big paycheck, if I make more money in a given month, that money's going into the market as soon as possible. But I don't always have a huge lump sum of money come in, and therefore I'm pretty predictable. I know what my business is going to provide. I know every single week what I'm going to be making based on my business, and therefore I have automation set up to go into the market automatically. Now, given I'm an entrepreneur, given I own my own business, I'm not a W-2 employee, I don't know exactly what that dollar amount is. So every time I pay myself, I have a predicted amount that goes into the market. But if I make any more money is going to go in right that second. I don't wait, hoard it into a big lump sum to invest it down the road. I take that money and I invest it right then and right there. And so it's really important to understand this concept, because when we talk about this online, a lot of influencers or financial people online will be saying, hey, we should do a lump sum and it's better than dollar cost averaging. And then all of a sudden you have people saving up for a Roth IRA purchase once a year. And it's like, whoa. That's not the actual point here. The point is get the money in as fast as humanly possible. So if I break down the stats from Finley and Zorin from 1976 to 2022 to kind of further the point, obviously, like I said, lump sum outperforms dollar cost averaging 68% of the time. Dollar cost averaging outperforms cash about 69% of the time, and lump sum outperforms cash 70% of the time. So lump sum and dollar cost averaging versus cash are pretty much the same. Hey, let's call it 7 out of 10 times. Nobody can predict the market. There's no reason to wait for a specific time to actually invest that lump sum. If you get the lump sum, invest the money in general. That's a general rule of thumb. But a lot of people get held back from fear. They're worried about the all-time highs. So since January 1926, the market has been in an all-time high 30% of the time. Literally a lot of the time, the market's at an all-time high, and that's a good thing, and it's going to continue to go up. So to be afraid, and you see this investor psychology all over the place. Well, the market's too high, or the market's really volatile, or the market's really crummy. Should I really do this lump sum, or should I really dollar cost average in? This is where the conversation gets a little more nuanced. So like I said, if you had $10,000 in a pile and you decided to either lump sum or dollar cost average, historically speaking, putting $10,000 in the market right then and there is going to do better. But I think the other piece of the puzzle you have to consider is the timeline in which you're investing. So if you have a 10, 20, 30, 40 year timeline, I'm going to lean to lump sum investing. Now, obviously, like I said, you might not have all that money right then and there. And obviously you should be dollar cost averaging always, like I said, general rule of thumb, unless you have that lump sum. But in your situation, what is going to play out in your mind is all the what ifs. What if the market drops 20%? What if the market continues to dip? And all these investors start to think like that at all points in time. Whether the market's at an all-time high, people wonder, well, what goes up must come down. Is it going to start dropping? When's it going to drop? Likely it's not going to. Likely over the long term, it's going to continue to go up. And then at the very bottom of the market, everyone's fearful. People are losing jobs. People are nervous. And so they're thinking, well, wait till the market recovers to actually start investing. Both of those thoughts are very, very flawed in a massive, massive way based on any bit of data I could present you. Now, obviously I presented data of the actual lump sum versus dollar cost averaging, and also the all-time high being 30% of the time the market is at an all-time high. And since 1926, the market has returned about 10%. In pretty much any period of time of 20 years or greater, you see the same 10% trend. Obviously, times can change. Obviously, the past is not indicative of the future, but you have to understand that a lot of times the history is going to continue to play out in just different ways. And so my expectation going forward is the market continues to do its thing it's always done, and that I should be invested in the market as long as possible, meaning I want my dollars into the market as soon as possible, and I'm going to get the best bang for my buck. But as an investor, and depending on the lump sum we're talking about here, a lot of people are scared to do this. Let's say you have 100,000. That's a lot different than $100. And maybe you have 400,000. Maybe you've never invested before and you're trying to learn how to invest. And so what I would say for that individual to think about is that if you were to invest, let's call it 100,000 for ease of math here, and that money dropped to 50,000 temporarily, because unless you actually hit sell, it's not an actual loss, it's a paper loss. Would you freak out and panic sell and actually take that loss into a realized loss? Or would you let it sit there realizing, hey, I'm investing in really good qualified ETFs and index funds. Long term, I'll probably be fine. It's not that big of a deal. I have a 10-year track record. I have a 20-year track record. How would you actually react to that lump sum falling in two? And now, of course, you could do it even more drastic and say, what if that fell 70%? What if that fell, 80% if you wanted to see and test yourself? But you also have to think, when you're asking yourself this, sometimes people are putting themselves in their best possible headspace. When these times happen, all the news headlines are saying it's the end of the world, the end of the market. Your family, your friends are losing jobs. You're talking to friends at the gym. You're talking to family out and about, and they're saying the same sentiment of like, this is going to be different this time. And they're going to play into your emotions in a big, big way. So if you're that individual, I would rather you dollar cost average money into the market, because it gives you the ability to have a little bit less risk. So if I'm putting, let's call it $1,000 over 10 weeks versus 10,000 week one, I know that even if the market dips over the next 10 weeks, I'm actually investing at lower amounts in the market valuations than I would if I put $10,000 in day one. At the same time, you could totally miss the boat, and that $10,000 invested in day one, you may never see that again. So there's pros and cons to both, but you have to understand yourself as an investor. I know me as an investor because I do it from actual experience. When I make a bunch of money in the business, or I have a big lump sum come in for some particular reason, and it's over and above my expected amount that I'm investing automatically, that money goes in ASAP. Like money goes in like literally this second. There is no thought process. There's no determination of where the market levels are sitting. I don't care. I'm putting that money in there for the long haul because I know the goal is 20, 30, 40 years. I don't have a 10-year goal or a 4-year goal. But if I had like a 2-year goal, or I'm trying to take that money out pretty soon, I'm probably not investing it. If it's less than 5 years, I'm probably putting it in a high yield savings account, because it wouldn't make entire sense to actually invest money anyways within a 5-year period, because there's too much volatility in that short window. But again, when you look at longer trends like 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years, you start to see the data is awesome at that point in time. And it's very favorable for somebody that gets the money into the market. Now, when I built my millionaire net worth, I was investing from, let's call it 2014 all the way up to 2024. So the last decade I've been investing. And during that time, we've had a lot of good. We've also had COVID. We also had 2022. And we also had some bad times along the way when everyone thought the market would never crash and burn. It does from time to time. And that's part of the game. And volatility is a feature of the market that you should embrace race. But again, when it comes to lump sum versus dollar cost averaging, I will say most of the time you're going to be more favorable getting that money in the market right away, but you have to consider your risk profile and how you react as an investor. Because even if you lump sum and you know long-term it's probably better, if you can't stay put and you panic sell, that goes against the entire principle of lump sum investing. And therefore you're probably better off if you just dollar cost average anyway. Remember, you are not the market. And so how you react with the market is how you get wealthy. And that's a very important concept to play out in this question. And I was reading a Morgan Stanley article, and the key takeaways of this, two specific ones in particular, were lump sum investing may generate slightly higher annualized returns than dollar cost averaging as a general rule. Similar to what I said, my general rule is always dollar cost average unless you had the lump sum. So it goes in line with exactly that, and the expectation that most times lump sum is going to be dollar cost averaging head to head. The second piece of it said, however, dollar cost averaging reduces initial timing risk, which may appeal to investors seeking to minimize potential short-term losses and regret risk. Regret risk meaning, oh crap, I put 10,000 or 100,000 in at day one thinking lump sum would be better. Now it's dropped, to 50,000 or in half, let's call it. I kind of regret that decision, even though over the next 10 to 20 years, it might still end up in my favor, but that's a long time to wait. And as an investor, there's a lot of emotions that come into play. So you have to consider all of these things when you go to make that decision. Again, most of my content, guys, is educating on every single potential scenario, walking you through the thought process behind that, showing you data points that back both sides of the argument, and also bringing the emotional component into your personal finances because it's so much bigger than just a statistic that lump sum's better than dollar cost averaging. Also to understand the context behind the actual conversation itself. So I hope today this really highlights exactly what you should be thinking about with dollar cost averaging versus lump sum. I hope it makes your decision a lot easier going forward. And remember, I would always dollar cost average unless I have a lump sum. I'll see you guys next Monday.